like to talk to you a little bit about how to feel energies. When we are incarnated, we only perceive things through our brains. And the same way as our brains evolve and can learn, so also our energetic perception can evolve and we can learn. The brain evolves in phases. So we have several senses. We can use our skin. We can sense pressure, we can sense distortion, we can sense heat, we can sense cold with our skin. This is usually the first sense which we start to develop. Then of course we have the sense of sight, very important for us, and we're quite lucky we actually have color sight, unlike many other animals. We also have the sense of taste, we have the sense of smell, we have hearing, and ultimately we also have internal senses which tell us about the position of our body, the movement of our body, which tell us about our emotions and which tell us about our thoughts. So all these different dimensions are methods for the brain to map the world outside of us. So all we know of the world is basically what we receive through our senses, through our skin, through our tongue, through our nose, eyes, ears. And the brain translates this into like a model of the outside world. Not all senses are equally well developed. So some people have a very acute sense of touch or a very acute sense of smell, and they can pick out lots of different fragrances, and other people hardly smell anything. This is partly due to the sensitivity of the sensors in the skin, and the other part is due to practice and the development of the brain. And people are genetically different, so people have different demands of sensors and different talents for using these different senses. Not everybody has perfect eyesight, for instance. And it's the same with energy in a way. So some people are very attuned to certain types of energy. They can sense life force or elemental energies or planetary energies, or they can sense ethereal energies like chakras and auras, or some people are even able to sense astral energies such as spirits. So these are all different modalities which the energy body can be more or less sensitive to. So this is very much like the sensitivity of like the sensors of our skin, of our eyes, of our ears. The second part is the interpretation. And here the two worlds come together, because to really sense the energetic world we also need to use our brains. And we actually need to train our brains. So just like a baby is learning by touching things, by smelling things, by stimulating itself, the senses become stimulated. When the senses become stimulated, also that part of the brain starts to develop, and that part of the brain starts to categorize different things. So it will say like, okay, this is heavy, this is light, or this is more heavy than the other thing, or this is warmer, or this is colder. So that is very much by contrast that our brain learns to distinguish things. And as we learn, the distinctions become more and more precise. So it's the same in language. So first we learn the concept of car, and then we learn the difference between a car and a truck, and then we can learn the difference between different makes of trucks. And the same with learning about nature, like first it's bird, and then, oh no, that's a chicken, that's a hawk, that's a magpie. So then we start to get more and more precise, and it's the same with energy perception. So in general the first sensations are kind of blurry and indistinct. So if we're talking about the sense of touch, we usually feel a tingly feeling, a crawling sensation, sometimes a burning sensation, pressure, hot or cold. These are usually the first senses we get when we try to map things onto our hands. When we use our eyes, usually the first sensation is that there is something we cannot see, or there is a light which is in a way not a light or other visual impressions, or some things come more into focus or become more blurry. These are typical physical sensations. With taste and smell, we are actually able to pick up a certain smell, and we may think, oh, it smells nice here, it smells horrible here, or what's that strange taste in my mouth? And in this way also it is mapped onto the brain. When it comes to sound, it gets a little bit more freaky, because people start hearing things, and often it is in the form of words, because it's an associative process. We are presented with an energy and we try to map it onto something we already know. So if I feel an energy with my hand, I map it onto the experiences my brain has already stored by using my physical hand. So it feels like pressure, heat, cold, friction, and it's the same with smell. We have smelled a lot of things in our lives, so we map it onto smells we know. But for us this is rather neutral, because we know that it is in a way just a passive thing outside of us which we are feeling in our way. But if we start using senses like sound, then we automatically more or less project an intelligence into it, which is not necessarily there. It can be, but it is not necessary. Because when we sense an energy, it is mapped, and with sound we map it onto words, or onto a phrase, or onto voices. And often these voices are voices of people we know, they are words we know, not always. Sometimes we also are introduced to new concepts. But the feeling that somebody is talking to you or something is talking to you is often a quite unnerving one. So for people who start with clairaudience, it is often more shocking experience than for people who start with feeling or seeing. Usually the sense which people start working with is the sense which is best developed. And in most people this is the sense of touch or the sense of sight. These are the most common entrances for energetic experiences to enter into our brain. The advantages of using the other sentences is that we map information differently. So for instance, if I see an energy and it is like red or yellow and has a certain shape, I can think about it. I can think like, okay, what does that mean? I can read a book about it, I can search my own experiences, where have I seen a similar energy before, and try to deduce what could be the meaning of what I'm seeing. If we use thoughts or sound, then usually there's also an aspect of interpretation immediately. Like instead of seeing a blur of energies, which I have to interpret, immediately it pops to mind like, okay, this person is angry, or this person is frustrated, or this person is very radiant or very overpowering. And this often comes through an association. We get images sometimes. So we might see the person in another form, usually an archetypal form. So we might see the person as a warrior, or as a wise old man or a wise old woman, and we often interpret these things as, okay, maybe that's the past life of this person, or this is a guide. And it's possible that you're seeing past lives or guides, but also possible that you're basically just in an associative process. And this makes this interpretative perception a little bit tricky. So the good news for the people who automatically interpret is that it is much quicker. You automatically get an impression and an explanation within seconds, while the person who has to see an energy has to think about it, and it takes a few minutes for them to reach usually the same conclusion. Also, the other part of it is that by automatization of the process, it is usually better. If I'm presented with several possibilities and I have to think about it and make judgment calls like, okay, it could be this, it could be that. What does this blur of energy mean? And depending on how healthy I am, how good my attention is, how excited my brain is or out of balance my brain is because of experiences I have had recently, the quality of the interpretation will fluctuate. And in general, you see for conscious decision processes that the accuracy is between, somewhere between 50 and 90%. So even in the best case, you're going to have a 10% margin of error. You're going to misinterpret things, which is quite large. And if we look at the unconscious process is, there's massive parallel processing. You have all these possible options, and the option which is the best match with the experiences you're getting, that one surfaces and the others are repressed. So you have an automatic selection mechanism which is based on your previous experiences. So the advantage is because you're actually accessing all possibilities at the same time, and the selection process is not polluted by your own thought processes, your emotional state. It is usually a more accurate answer. The problem is also that the answer is based on your experience, so you cannot really move out of your own box, and you will always interpret things in terms of your own life, of your own experiences. So this creates a kind of a bias, a twist in how you interpret things and how you see the world. So it is not possible for a person to see the world in an objective way. It's only possible to see it in a subjective way. And our brain is very much the subjective filter, which is blocking us from seeing the world in a wider perspective. We can compensate for this a little bit by trying to be open-minded, by trying to be non-reactive, unattached, not afraid, not hopeful. So if we do perceptions in a very meditative state, a lot of the bias and clutter and predispositions which are natural to our brain can be filtered out a little bit. So this really helps with the perception. It also helps if the person you are perceiving is also free of this. Because as I said, like, energy affects energy. So if the person you're reading is very much biased or afraid or hopeful of something, then your energy too will pick up on that, will move along with that as you make the contact, and you also become more biased, more afraid or hopeful. And this will also distort the perception. So ideally, before you start to do any reading, you should calm yourself, empty yourself, meditate, and the person you're working on should also be as relaxed as possible, as empty as possible, because then you can get the best quality of reading. It's also possible to teach your brain how to map energies onto different senses. So for me, I'm a very tactile person. I really like massaging, I like touching, I like feeling fabric. So for me this was also the first entry into energy. I started feeling energy with my hands, the shape of it, the texture of it, the pressure, the warmth, the cold, the movement under my hands. And this was quite helpful. But also a little bit limiting. Because if you want to know something, you have to start feeling. And well, at the very least it looks a little bit weird if you go around, ooh, can I feel you? And people will start crying, pervert, help, police, and you get in trouble. So the sight is a lot more easy to use, a lot more unobvious to use. So I started practicing with techniques to develop my sight, and it took me about 2 years, mainly because the techniques I was taught were inappropriate for me. So I'll go a little bit into my personal history here. How I was taught to work was through an associative process. They told me that basically you have this whole store of colors and associations with colors, and just let these associations well up and overwhelm you. So in this way whatever energy is there, you will sense what color is there. Because your energy body is reading it, it just needs to map it onto your associations. Seemed like a very logical method to use, and I tried it for several years without success. I have seen it work for many people though, especially women. Work very well with this process, so I'm not saying it's a bad method, I'm just saying it was not for me. Another method which I actually happened on by chance was actually when my consciousness shifted a little bit, when my energy body detached itself from the physical body. So this happens naturally when you're asleep, or when you're daydreaming, or in a meditative state, or when you're sick, or in some other shock. So this is the way it also happened to me, and then my energy body was able to react much more quickly, much more strongly, because usually the energy body is very much connected to the physical body, and the physical senses overwhelm the energetic senses. So I was feeling my own body, but not so much what was being outside. And when my body got a little bit detached, then I couldn't hear my own body as well anymore, but I could feel sensations coming from the outside much more strongly. So this, in a way, created an impression which broke the threshold. So the impressions I was getting before, while I was still within my body, were not strong enough. And this is also why I said you really need to have a healthy and clean energy body for good perception. So, but once this happened to me, I could feel like, okay, this is a method to get stronger impressions, and those strong impressions quite easily map onto sight. The sight was very nice for me, because then I can look at things, people on TV, I can read photos much more easily, people on the terrace. So this also allowed me to practice a lot more easily with seeing different types of energy and how it all works out. The sense of sound came to me quite unexpectedly. I started first having what I thought were auditory hallucinations or other strange effects. I just basically started hearing voices, and these voices kind of reacted to me. So I was either talking to myself or talking to something else. But these voices also gave me knowledge, which I could not rationally have. So there were two possibilities. Either there was something which knew more than I did, which was telling it to me, or another part of me was perceiving it and telling it also to me, or making it aware through sound. It was probably a little bit of both. The problem with sound is that your own thoughts are also usually translated into words or into sounds. So it is very hard to distinguish between your own thoughts and the impressions you're getting from the outside. It helps to, for instance, try automatic writing, write down what you hear, because often you will find that if you're indeed truly guided or inspired, it's also another energy coming through, which is not yours, and you can read from the energy in your writing. Is it my energy, or is it actually another energy in the writing, which I'm manifesting in this way? So this can help you to distinguish between your own thoughts, your own energies, and energies coming from external sources. It's also important not to be afraid of these voices, but also to realize that ultimately power and choice lies with you. It's not because some voice says something that you have to do it, but consider it advice or suggestion. So the power of smelling energies. This is not a power I naturally possessed, or I came upon very normally, because my own sense of smell is not that well developed. I had a girlfriend who did have the ability to smell energies, and by being intimate with her, I felt her energies and in a way absorbed her patterns and recreated them in my own energy body. which allowed me to start smelling energies. Even though I can smell energies, I'm still not very good with them because my associative process is quite primitive. So I know of naturopaths who work a lot with different herbs, different flowers, different aromas, and they can often smell in the energy what the person needs. So they smell the cure, like, okay, this person needs a little bit of lavender and some chamomile, a little bit of mint, or they can smell what the problem is, like, okay, this part of the body or energy body smells putrid, or this smells tensed or coppery, and this way they can also get indications of exactly what is wrong or what is the distortion in the energy body, and also what is the cure. But I don't have this whole framework of knowledge to map smells upon, nor do I have the acute scent memory to do this in a very good way, but it's also a method which can be used. The sense of emotion is also a hard one to use, because it's very easy to mix things up. So you can vibrate along with the other person, which allows you to feel what they are feeling, so you can sense sometimes their physical experiences. You can feel how their body feels, where it is tight, where it is breathing easily, where there's pain, where there's pressure inside the body. You can feel them emotionally, so you can feel whether they're sad, glad, frustrated, or something else, and you can even, to a degree, pick up some of their thoughts or habits or action patterns. So usually the thought processes in humans, they go too quickly to follow verbatim, but often like the longer term processes like intentions or desires, they can be picked up this way. But it's very hard to distinguish what is really the other person and what is your reaction to the other person. So for instance, if the other person is in pain, I might feel pity, I might feel sympathy, I might feel a desire to help. And what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that the other person is feeling? So this again requires really a very good state of meditative consciousness, so that you're able to really not react to what is happening, or to really know your own reactions, and by knowing your own reactions also know what is going on with the other person. Ultimately, it is about exposure. So we have been able to train our brains to work with energies. We have done so usually in many different lifetimes. But every time the brain has to be trained anew, because every time it's a new brain. We don't take the brains of our old bodies with us into our new bodies. So this is a process which must be repeated in every incarnation. If people work with it extensively, then also their spirit will have more experience in training the brain. But ultimately, even though there is a talent or there is experience, it needs to be practiced. Just like anything, just like writing, math, learning language, these are also things which have to be learned anew in every incarnation. And it does have an advantage. If you worked really hard on it in your previous incarnation, you will learn it more quickly in this incarnation. You will have a talent or positive karma that way. And it's the same for energies. So also the investments you're doing in this life, in feeling energies and sensing energies, they're things which are really integrating into our spirit, and it is easier in your next incarnation to be clairvoyant, to be clairsentient, or to be clairaudient. So keep up the practice, don't wear yourself out. Usually if you start working with energy in the beginning, it's best not to do it for more than 20 minutes, because you really need to liberate your own life force, which becomes then very fluid, and it then starts to react, and if it becomes too much, also your own life force can become too chaotic. It can lose its foundation. You can in a way forget who you are or how you're supposed to be, because your energy body is fluid, and if it changes too much from your normal pattern, it cannot easily go back to its normal pattern, and this creates a kind of a hangover-like feeling if you practice sensing energy or working with energy for too long. As you work more with energy, your body will get more used to it, you will become more resilient and able to work for longer periods. But especially in the beginning, try not to overdo it, because if you do so, if you harm yourself, also a safety mechanism will kick in and will start blocking these experiences, block you from feeling energies, from sensing energies, because it is harmful to you. So be gentle with yourself and enjoy.